Hey Wargamers, today I want to talk about the new Warhammer Age of Sigmar. I've got a few requests to share my thoughts on it, and now that it's been out for a little bit, I've had some time to think about it and digest what these really big changes in how Warhammer Fantasy is played, how that actually influences us as players and the hobby and everything like that. So right off the bat, I'll say that if you're familiar with my channel, you know I'm not a serious fantasy tournament player. When I do go to tournaments, I play 40K, and so just keep that in mind when listening to my thoughts on it. It's not from the standpoint of someone that's going to organized events for fantasy. It's someone that plays fantasy with a small group of people for fun and doesn't take it too seriously. But overall, I'm accepting of this transition. I'm not super enthusiastic about it. It is what it is. I would have preferred a 9th edition of Fantasy, but I understand that Games Workshop made this move because they thought it gave them the best opportunity to continue to offer fantasy support. So by that I mean, for them, it seems like fantasy wasn't working, and so they weren't getting the revenue out of it that they needed, so they tried to do something different. And that's just the way it is. That's the rule, the decision that they made, and it's kind of a take it or leave it situation. So I'm going to take it. So let's talk a little bit about kind of the negative stuff first, because I want to end on a positive note. And like I said, I'm accepting of it, so I'm not, I'm not being a negative Nancy about this. But there are some things that I'm less than enthusiastic about. The first one, of course, is that there isn't a effort at all at internal balance. There's no army construction constraints. There's no point values at all, anything like that. And so that really, just means, that you're not taking this seriously at all in terms of having some sort of, strategical balance between the two armies. And some people say that there wasn't really balance to begin with because points were never really perfectly consistent across army books, right? Like, for example, a 40K example that Gil brings up all the time is that Blood Angels had TAC Marines that were more expensive than standard Space Marine TAC Marines, but they were exactly the same. And so if you look at that scale of comparison, yeah, points can be a mechanism of imbalance, right? But I think that is only true at the micro scale. If you're talking comparing units to units, not at whether or not you're going to play 500 points or 2,000 points, right? Because under a point system, you have that kind of macro balance. You don't have the micro balance necessarily, but you do have the macro balance between having a 500-point army and a 2,000-point army. And with Age of Sigmar, you do not have that. So, that's unfortunate. Not only from the stance of someone who's trying to have two armies on equal footing, but also from the standpoint of organized play and pickup games. So for tournaments, it makes it pretty much impossible to have a tournament that that is somehow putting players on equal footing and therefore has a meaningful outcome. So the loss of points basically annihilates any potential for that unless GW comes out with some sort of tournament packet, which there are rumors saying that might happen. However, based on the history of GW trying to distance itself from competitive play, that seems unlikely. But who knows? Maybe they're getting enough negative feedback about this that they want to introduce some sort of stopgap in order to kind of help smooth the transition over. So it's possible. But also, aside from tournaments not having any type of basis for putting people on equal footing is that if you go do a pickup game, you have no idea what to expect, right? So if I'm playing a game with my close friends, we kind of have we have a gentleman's agreement about what types of things we're going to bring, what scale we're playing at, that sort of thing. You can do that too with a pickup game, but it requires a lot more effort, and so that's detrimental for the pickup scene. I want to be able to just grab my army, go, and if I need to, like, wait around for someone and they'll show up, and who knows who they are or what they're bringing, but I can play against them. That is ideally what I would do in a pickup game situation, right? But without points, that's really hard to do. Now, Age of Sigmar does have certain sudden death things that can make the game go really, really quickly in favor of one person or another, and so that helps a little bit, but not to the same extent that just being very straightforward about it and saying, listen, we got 2,000 points. That's one way of just being very straightforward about what type of scale you're going to be playing at, whereas the sudden death missions are more of a workaround to that, right? So I would prefer to have some sort of basic reference for what size armies we're using, and so the lack of points has a detriment to pickup games as well. The secondary issue is that the rules themselves are extremely simple. They're oversimplified, and I think that's really one of the draws of Warhammer Fantasy for the people that play it now, was the sophistication of the game. And because the rules are so simplified, it in some ways reduces the complexity of the game that required you to think many turns ahead, right? Particularly in the movement phase, right? So the movement phase with Warhammer Fantasy, you have to plan out where you're moving, how you're going to position yourself, basically have an overarching strategy going into it. Whereas with this Age of Sigmar rule set, that there's much less pressure on having a strategy worked out ahead of time. And so that makes this the type of player or the play style required of the game less desirable to some people. So those are some of the big issues that I have with it. But overall, there are some good things that I really think are not to be overlooked. The first is that there's no illusion of serious gameplay or balance, right? So no longer do we have to really even pretend to care about if these things are balanced. We can just do whatever we want, and so it really is just a game for fun. You don't have to take it seriously or whatever, and that is a benefit in some ways. That's a little bit more relaxed approach to the game, which is nice if you're looking to just have fun. But also, and potentially more importantly, now there are no more bad units. The thing that made units bad was because you had a limited number of points or force organization slots that you could use, and some units were more advantageous to take than others. Now there's no scarcity, so everything is fine. Everything works just great. There are no bad units because you can take whatever you want. And so that is actually really nice. You don't have to really worry about what you're bringing because you could bring whatever you want. And so in that way, that's really nice. You don't have to, well, not to say that all units are the same, but that there's no more opportunity cost, right? It's like, well, should I brought this when I really should have brought that, or or whatever. You don't have to deal with that, and so that is nice. There's a potential for added rules later on because it is so simple. And finally, there's kind of this silver lining that it's better than nothing, which, you know, Games Workshop could have just discontinued support for fantasy altogether, and so instead of doing that, they did this. I know that's a really crappy argument for doing it or having it, but it is an argument, and it's, you know, something that you can consider. But yeah, so really, I mean, I do think part of the whole balance issue, right, is, like I said, right, nothing's bad anymore. And so the way using a point system kind of sets two constraints on Games Workshop revenue, right? One is the actual economics, the real world economics of supply and demand and what people are going to buy and what they're not going to buy. The second is the game economics of what points you're going to spend on which units, and therefore which units you're going to buy. So, and Games Workshop has often said that rules drive model sales, right? So, or at least that's the perception, right? And so, by removing that first or that second filter of having points constrain purchases, Games Workshop can potentially make a lot more revenue because people are no longer concerned about which units are the most competitive choices or anything like that. Granted, that can be undermined if enough people just walk away from the game because they don't want to deal with not having point systems or balance or the complicated rule set. So if enough people walk away, then this was a net loss for Games Workshop, and that will probably be the end of fantasy forever. But yeah, so like I said, I'm accepting of it. I think there are some bad things in terms of the consequences for organized play and pickup groups, but I also see benefits in that if I'm just playing with a couple guys that I always play with, this is really simple and I don't have to put a lot of thought or effort into getting to the table. And once I'm there, it's relatively simple to play. So those are the nice parts. And I think that if you have the models and you want to play with them, you might as well focus on the benefits as opposed to the costs. So thanks for watching, everybody. Let me know what you think of Age of Sigmar in the comments below. And of course, happy wargaming.